Today in the EU, how Donald Trump's comeback will shape the rest of the world.
This will forever be remembered as the day the American people regained control of their country.
Convicted once, impeached twice, Republicans' darling Donald Trump will serve a second term as the 47th President of the United States. He scored an unprecedented victory in most swing states and some historically blue states, which confirmed his return to the White House. With both Senate and House on his side, the businessman turned politician is likely to enjoy an obstacle free pathway to turn his electoral promises into legislation. But what did Trump guarantee to the American public in the first place, and what is at the root of his remarkable comeback?
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU.
I'm having a call with Euractiv's Sarantis Michaloupolos, who is on the other side of the Atlantic in Florida to take the temperature at the incoming president's headquarters. Hi, Sarantis.
Hello, Giada.
Now, you've been on the ground since the beginning of the week. What's the atmosphere like there?
Clearly intense. One could say that this could be normal for a country in a pre-election period, but here it's a bit different. Why? Because it's clear. You can see the deep divisions within the society. I wouldn't exaggerate by saying that two different cosmo theories clashed over the last months. The logic I noticed when I was speaking to people, on the ground, their logic was it's either us or them.
So a deep level of polarization.
Huge, huge. This is something I haven't seen before.
And I only pray to God that Donald Trump becomes our 47th president or this country is done, finished.
But, in general, nations usually look for a common ground after the elections. Because for a nation, despite the disagreements, the different political affiliations, after the elections, usually there must be, in general, there must be a wider common objective to follow after the elections. This is something I didn't see here. It's not a coincidence that Donald Trump, in his first speech after his victory was announced, he referred to the successful creation and victory of a political movement, not a party, but a movement. So the question is whether this movement that will dominate as of the beginning of 2025 will basically embrace other ideas as well.
And traditional red states are even redder than there used to be. In Florida alone, Trump scored 10 points more than in 2020. What are Trump voters saying?
People here didn't see any other alternative than Trump winning. Actually, the Trumpists were wondering how Kamala Harris could win. The more moderate Republican voters were saying that they didn't know Kamala Harris as a politician. She was overshadowed by Biden. She didn't take any political initiative under Biden's administration. Other moderate Republican voters were saying that she didn't come up clear about her program and gave the impression that she would only continue Joe Biden's policies. And they didn't like these policies. In private discussions, they were basically very frequently bringing up the deterioration of their standards of living in the last 4 years because of inflation. If you notice, all this time, Trump has been insisting on bringing down taxes to make America great again. This is what he repeated constantly in the last week. He talked about the golden era. All these statements give people optimism. And let me also tell you that he was also reminding them that he's a businessman who knows how to fix finances. Another issue is that locally here in Florida is that some Republicans, moderate or more hardcore, didn't like the power grab from Biden within the Democrat Party. They found it shady, and this is something they didn't like.
So you think Kamala Harris suffered because of Joe Biden's mistakes or faults during his mandate?
Some say that she was carrying the legacy of Joe Biden and she paid the cost for that. Some others say that she shouldn't have run as a Democrat candidate at all. because surveys showed that Biden could better compete Donald Trump. But definitely, there will be a discussion in the Democratic Party over its future identity and where they will stand when it comes to this new political movement Trump claims that he created. At least this is what local analysts suggest.
Indeed, this is a terrible failure for the Democratic Party. We have to contextualize this to really understand that as Trump left office in 2021, 68% of Americans said that they would not have liked to see him back in office. So, what's at the root of this comeback when we look at the numbers and the polls?
Here, hardcore Trumpists, Jada, gave me the impression that they never admitted the defeat in 2020. So this vote was kind of revenge for many of them. On the other hand, Harris was insisting too much on topics such as abortion, for instance, because she wanted to attract women, right? And surveys before the elections were suggesting that this topic, abortion, is high on the agenda. However, in the end, we realized that it was not. It was not a crucial factor for people to vote. And there is proof for that because the majority of white women voted for Trump. And this shows that Harris mistakenly focused on abortion.
Well, I'm going to talk about Trump the man, Donald J. Trump the man. He's kind, he's generous, and he cares about all Americans. It doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter.
Let's contextualize. According to polls by the BBC, 54% of women ended up voting for Harris, 44 for Trump. So there is a bit of a divide. But then, yes, indeed, when you look at race and background, that really made a difference. What about race when it comes to men then? Because I think it's interesting to look at those numbers as well, especially when it comes to Latino voters.
Yeah, when it comes to Latino voters, this is more related to migration, right? We all know what Trump's position before the election was on migration, but I want you to focus on this. His harsh anti-migration rhetoric focused on irregular migrants, not
Mhm.
legal migrants. One could say that he played smartly on this. Why? Because he said that he's going to expel 1 million irregular migrants, complete a wall in the country south. He promised even death penalty for irregular migrants who kill an American citizen or a policeman. But he didn't put the legal migrants in the same picture. And legal migrants didn't want to be in the same box with irregular migrants. So Trump played smartly here. He made the separation and they were pleased. That's why they voted for him. And at the same time, Harris had no strategy at all on migration.
I wanted to talk about disinformation as well and the role that it played, the significant role that it played in this election. Now, you are at the Trump's campaign headquarters in Florida. What were voters telling you about the way the media portrayed this election?
They were not super pleasant feelings. I mean, almost all Republican voters believe that the American mainstream media were spreading propaganda against Trump constantly, not only now.
Okay, so we are polarized, but there's a good reason for that. If you've been fed lies by the American media for years and years and years that he's a dictator, they're now calling him fascist and Nazis. They're saying the same thing about us as supporters of Donald Trump. They have even so far as gone to call us our current president calling us garbage.
And Trump took advantage of that.
Mhm.
It's not a coincidence that he attacked journalists even just a couple of days before the vote. I mean, and he was heavily criticized by the opposition for that. But the point is that Trump knew exactly what he was doing because Trump's campaign could measure, the voters' vibes and spot their frustration. That's why he attacked media just 3 days, if I'm not mistaken, before the elections. However, on the other side, there is a practical impact as well. All international media were excluded from the convention of the Republican Party on the election night. And also, some American media that criticized Trump were excluded. So only Trump friendly media essentially took part in this. And this is not how democracy works. And this is something that Trump's new administration should look at least to bring about, this social peace that is needed in this country.
Thank you, Sarantis. And to understand better what Trump's manifesto entails for the rest of the world, I'm joined in the studio by Alice Taylor, our editor at Euractiv. Hi, Alice.
Hello.
So we're here to look into Donald Trump's promises, and his campaign has been characterized by a series of extremely ambitious ones.
What a great honor this is. I want to thank you. I will not let you down. America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, richer, safer, and stronger than it has ever been before. God bless you, and God bless America.
And that has worked. 73% of Republicans believe that Trump can bring the change that the country needs. So what type of change are we talking about?
Well, I started looking through all the changes he's promised, all the things he's promised since the start of the campaign, and he has made a lot of promises. I can't go through all of them. But what I found quite interesting with some of them is he seems to have targeted certain groups. So he's promised to cut taxes for people who receive tips. So that's people working in hotels, restaurants, I guess even Uber drivers, platform workers who get tips. And tips obviously account for a huge amount of their salary. So by cutting taxes on that, he's giving more financial empowerment to a huge demographic of people. He's also said he's going to increase child tax credits. Again, this is, to more than double. This is a huge amount of money potentially for families. He's also said he's going to cut taxes on social security payments for seniors. Again, this is another demographic that he's mobilized with this sort of cut. So he's made lots of promises, about ending the war in Ukraine and fining schools that push what he calls the trans ideology, lots and lots of things. So he has actually made some very smart promises that target a very large and broad demographic of people.
Indeed, Trump's winning card was the promise of a boost to the economy. And one of the ways he plans to do that is, quote, putting an end to China being the most favored nation in the world. Now, how does the new president plan to do so?
Well, depending on where you look and what mood he was in when he said it, he said he's going to impose tariffs, between 60 and 100% of imports of Chinese goods to the US. He's also said he's going to put tariffs potentially on products from other countries as well.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff. The higher the tariff, the more likely it is that the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff.
So this means that the focus is really on boosting domestic production, made in America products, and putting any other products at a disadvantage, particularly China. Again, this is a smart move for anyone with a business that's producing anything in the US. It's not good news, however, for the EU, and not particularly good news for China either.
Yeah, and that would be consistent with what Trump did during his first term. During his mandate, the U.S. kickstarted more than 200 aggressive actions against China, although it has to be said that economists are wary of the consequences that imposing tariffs could have even on U.S. exports. The policy could backfire. But I want to talk more about the future role of the U.S. in ongoing wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Now, in his manifesto, he claims a return to peace through strength. What does that mean for Ukraine?
Well, firstly, I'm a bit confused because he did initially say that he would solve the war between Ukraine and Russia within 24 hours, but he didn't say sort of exactly when that 24 hours starts. And then he said he's going to do it before he's inaugurated in January. So, we could be looking at an end to the war any time between tomorrow morning and January. Who knows what's going on in his mind, but he's been very shy on details. People tend to think that he is going to push for Ukraine to sort of give up some of its territory, which has been seized by Russia. This is what people think. I'm not sure if even he really knows, but I think we can say quite clearly, and a lot of people are afraid to say this, that Ukraine are not winning the war, and the chance of them winning the war in this current trajectory is not very high. It may be that they are going to be backed into a corner and forced to negotiate on these terms, which will involve giving over a chunk of their territory. This is the reality. Money is going to run out. Aid for Ukraine is up for debate in the US. It's also in the EU as well. Countries are getting tired of pumping money into the situation. So there does need to be an end to it. As for whether he's going to end it by tomorrow morning, I'm not completely convinced on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think money is really the most important part of the picture. So far, the US has donated 61 billion in monetary value in weapons and equipment. That's 6 times what Germany, which is the largest European donor, has given, and that might change very soon, especially because Trump during the campaign has refused to express whether he wanted Ukraine to win the war.
But another thing as well, let me just say, I'm a bit confused in a way as well, because in my view, America, the governments, they do love a good war because they produce an awful lot of weapons. So wars do tend to be quite lucrative, and he wants to up sort of domestic production of things. So I'm not quite sure with, how ending the war in Ukraine is going to impact that as well. But let's see.
Yeah, that might just be campaign jargon because at the same time, he did meet with Zelensky in September to discuss his victory plan, which suggests that he wants to be involved in foreign policy more than he's
and
actually.
Zelensky was quite quick to congratulate him today and said, we're on the same, I'm paraphrasing, but, we're on the same page. We're going to work towards victory. Although I imagine underneath it all, he's actually quite nervous about what that's going to entail.
I want to ask you the same question about the Middle East. How do you see this peace through strength approach unfolding in the region?
This is a really difficult question to answer. I mean, and it's also quite difficult for me to separate my personal views as well. I mean, obviously, what happened on the 7th of October was terrible. But I think, we've had, 44,000 people have been killed in Gaza. There's a humanitarian catastrophe there that's now spilling over into Lebanon. I mean, thousands of people are dying. Thousands are in refugee camps. I mean, thousands have been displaced. This is insane. It has to come to an end. But I am concerned that Trump is, he does favor Israel quite openly. He's said he's going to quash pro-Palestinian protests on campuses and things like this.
In Europe, the streets of Paris, London, and Brussels are overrun by mobs of Hamas supporters changing their jihad slogans in the heart of the Western capital. And our colleges and universities, they're going loco.
I don't know if there is a solution to the problem with Israel and Gaza, and I don't think an American or a European government has the guts to stand firm against Israel because of historical issues, because of stigma to do with sort of opposing Israel. I don't think they really have the guts to do it, but I'm not sure. He may well be able to solve the problem with Ukraine, but I really don't know how anyone can go about solving the situation there. Obviously the two-state solution is ideal, but I don't see this happening. I have to be completely honest.
I mean, we have to say that Trump really did deliver on his pro-Israel promises. He championed the Abraham Accords, which normalized fast-tracked normalization of relationships with neighboring countries for Israel. But it has to be said that these accords also led to an escalation of the conflict. So it's really hard to predict what will happen.
And it's difficult. There is no doubt Hamas is a terrorist organization. They need to be stopped. The EU wants that. The US wants that. But the solution to stamping out Hamas is not decimating an entire country, an entire population. In the meantime, Israel need to be stopped from doing this. But they're walking a very difficult line, because how do you stop this but also eradicate Hamas? It is a very, very difficult situation. He's been pro-Israel, but I mean, let's see. He said, I read earlier, he's made these promises and he's going to make good on them. So let's see.
Thank you, Alice. I'm Giada Santana, and this was Euractiv's Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our newsletters, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite streaming platform. Don't forget to leave us a star review. It will really help us spread the word about our work. This podcast was produced by Miriam Sainz de Tejada, Charles Cohen, and I. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.